Listen to ma'am. If you think breakups are about moving on, you've been lied to. If you believe that an avoidant is done when they leave, you don't understand human nature. I'm about to tell you something that's going to blow your mind. Are you ready? Listen to me. If you think avoidants just don't care or move on easily, you've been sold a lie. They don't just walk away and forget. They don't just disappear because they're over you. No, they need distance like oxygen. It's their drug. It's their escape. And if you don't understand why, you'll keep falling for the same trap over and over again. Let me tell you something that will shock you. Avoidants don't crave love the way you do. They crave control. They crave the feeling of being unbothered, untouchable, and independent. But here's the messed up part. Independence only feels powerful when someone else is desperate to take it away. They don't actually want to be alone. They just want to feel like they could be alone anytime they want. That's the game they're playing. Guess what? The anxious ex is their favorite opponent. You ever notice how they push you away when you get too close? How they suddenly become cold, distant, like they couldn't care less. And right when you start pulling back, boom, they come running back with just enough warmth to keep you hooked. This isn't love, this IS control. This is a toxic cycle where the avoidant needs to feel wanted, but only on their terms. The moment you start making them need you back, their fear kicks in and they run. But here's where it gets crazy. They only feel free when you're chasing them. You want proof. So think about the moment you finally let go, the second you stop texting, the day you stop checking in. The moment you finally say, I can't do this anymore. What happens? Do they stay gone? Do they move on happily, never looking back? Hell no, they start creeping back in. They start watching your stories. They send that random, hey, how have you been? Text. They throw breadcrumbs your way just to see if you'll bite. Why? Because now their distance doesn't feel like power, it feels like emptiness. And this is where most people fall right back into the trap, because that little sign of attention feels like love. You think they must miss me. They must care. Wrong. They don't miss you. They miss the feeling of escaping you. And the only way to feel that escape again is to pull you back in just so they can push you away again. Do you get it? This isn't about love. This is about the rush they get from being chased and the control they feel when they leave. You ever wonder why avoidants don't chase the way anxious people do? Because the moment they have to chase, they feel weak. They feel out of control. That's why when you finally break the cycle, when you stop giving them that chase, they start spiraling. And what do? They try to reel you back in with just enough words, just enough effort to make you believe this time is different. But it's not different. It's just the same game, reset to level 1. You have to understand something. Avoidants are wired to value distance over connection. They were trained from childhood or past relationships to believe that emotional closeness equals danger. Maybe they had parents who suffocated them with expectations. Maybe they were abandoned and learned that emotions are unsafe. Maybe they've been hurt so badly that running feels safer than loving. But whatever the reason, their programming is clear. The second someone gets too close, they feel trapped. But here's the part that nobody tells you. That freedom they crave, it's not real. It's an illusion, because true freedom isn't running away. It's feeling safe enough to stay. But avoidants don't know that. They've tricked themselves into believing that the high of escaping is happiness, when really it's just a distraction from their own fears. And guess who plays right into that illusion? The anxious partner. The one who says, let me love you. Let me fix you. Let me prove I won't leave. Boom. That's exactly the energy the avoidant needs to justify running again. Let me make this crystal clear. The avoidant doesn't want love the way you do. They want the illusion of love, but only when it's on their terms. The moment love feels like a responsibility, they freak out. The moment they feel expected to show up, to be consistent, to actually be there for someone else instead of just protecting themselves, they sabotage it. But at the same time, they don't want to be alone either. They want someone to be there to miss them, to pine over them, Jay's not too close. They want to be chased, but they don't want to be caught. They want to be desired, but they don't want to be responsible for that desire. And this is why they always go back to anxious exes, because nobody feeds their need for distance better than someone who is terrified of losing them. Think about it. Who else is going to keep running after them no matter how many times they pull away? Who else is going to let them disappear and reappear without consequences? Who else is going to accept the bare minimum and call it love? The anxious ex is the perfect match for an avoidant, because they will never stop trying. And the avoidant, they will never stop running. So what happens when the anxious ex finally gets tired? When they wake up and say, I'm done, that's when the avoidant feels something they weren't expecting: discomfort. Not because they love you, but because the game just ended. And an avoidant without a chase is like an addict without a fix. The high of escape is gone and now they're left with nothing. That's why they come back. Not because they suddenly want a healthy relationship, but because they need to restart the pattern. And here's the million-dollar question: will you let them? You need to understand something right now. Avoidants are not independent. That's a damn myth. They walk around acting like they don't need anybody, like they're free spirits who just don't do attachment. But guess what? That's a lie. They are just as dependent as anyone else, but their drug of choice isn't love, it's distance. And the only way they can feel that distance is if someone is desperately trying to close it. That's why they always come back to the anxious ex, because nobody feeds their addiction better than the person who's terrified of losing them. This isn't about love. This isn't about missing you. You need to stop falling for that illusion. Avoidants come back because they crave the feeling of being wanted, chased, and pursued. It makes them feel powerful. It makes them feel in control. And who gives them that feeling better than anxious partner? Nobody. You ever notice how the second you start pulling away, they suddenly show up? Like clockwork. One day they're distant, cold, emotionally unavailable. The next, they're texting you, checking in, dropping little breadcrumbs of affection just to see if you're still hooked. And the moment they get that validation, the moment they know you still want them, boom, they pull away again. Why? Because the game isn't about connection, it's about control. And guess who plays right into it? The anxious partner. The one who will always be there, always hoping, always waiting for the avoidant to come around. The anxious ex is the perfect drug because they don't just walk away. They don't just move on. They cling, they chase, they overanalyze every little thing the avoidant does. And to an avoidant, that is the ultimate ego boost. That is what makes them feel safe, not love, not intimacy, but the reassurance that no matter what they do, you will always be there. But here's the part that will shock you. Avoidants don't actually want to lose you. They just want to control when and how they have you. They want to keep you at arm's length, just close enough to feel your presence, but far enough to avoid responsibility. They want you available, but not too available. They want your love, but only when it doesn't demand anything from them. And the second you ask for more, the second you say, I need consistency, I need effort, I need to know you care, they panic, they shut down, they run, because to them, love doesn't feel safe. It feels like a trap. But wait, it gets crazier, because when you finally give up, when you finally say, I can't do this anymore, that's when they come running back. Not because they've changed, not because they suddenly realized you're the one, but because their addiction is kicking in again. The loss of your attention, the loss of your energy, the loss of that chase that makes them anxious. And an avoidant who feels anxious, they don't reflect, they don't grow, they reek tea. And their reaction is to pull you back in just so they can push you away again. The cycle never ends. This is why they don't go after people who are secure. A secure person won't play the game. A secure person won't tolerate hot and cold behavior. A secure person will say, if you can't show up fully, I'm out. And avoidance, they hate that. They hate people they can't control. That's why they always go for anxious partners. Because an anxious person will always try harder. They will always believe if I just love them enough, they'll finally stay. But that's the trap. The avoidant was never going to stay. They were just going to come and go as they please, off the anxious person's constant all giving just enough to get them hooked. You want to know why they don't choose someone else? Because nobody will try harder than an anxious ex. Nobody will tolerate more mixed signals. Nobody will keep believing in the potential of what could be instead of seeing the truth of what I ask. The avoidant knows this, and that's why they always circle back, because they know exactly what to say to get you to lower your guard. They know how to trigger your hope. They know how to make you feel like maybe this time will be different. And the moment you believe it, the moment you let them in again, the cycle resets. They get their fix. And before you know it, they're going again. And this is where you have to wake UP. You have to realize that this isn't about you not being good enough. This isn't about you not being lovable. This isn't about you needing to prove your worth. The avoidance pattern has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with their addiction to control and distance. They are not coming back because they love you. They are coming back because they love how you make them feel. And there's a huge difference. So the next time they reappear, ask yourself, are they showing up with consistency? Are they finally giving you the love and security you deserve? Or are they just feeding their own ego, looking for another hit of validation before they disappear again? Because if you don't see the pattern, you will repeat it over and over and over again. Listen to me. You think an avoidant walks away and never looks back. You think they leave because they've moved on, that they're somehow immune to missing you. Wake UP. That's not how this works. They don't walk away because they're over you. They walk away because they expect you to keep chasing them. They leave knowing you'll keep reaching out, keep checking in, keep waiting for them to come around. And that's exactly what gives them their power. But what happens when the anxious ex finally stops? When you finally get exhausted, when you finally break, that is when the avoidant faces something they never saw coming, panicky. Because here's the truth nobody tells you: avoidants don't feel powerful when they're alone. They feel powerful when they know someone is still waiting for them. The anxious ex is the one thing that makes their escape feel good. It reassures them that they're still desired, still wanted, still in control. They don't need to be present. They don't need to be emotionally available. They just need to know that somewhere out there, you are still thinking about them. But when that safety net disappears, when they wake up one day and realize the texts have stopped, the calls aren't coming, and you finally started living your life without them, that's when they spiral. That is when they suddenly can't stop thinking about you. You ever notice how avoidants seem totally fine after a breakup? How they go about their lives like you never existed? How they post like nothing happened, act cold, disappear into thin air. That's not them moving on. That's them escaping. That's them avoiding their emotions, running from the weight of connection, distracting themselves with anything and everything so they don't have to feel. But what happens when the distraction wears off? What happens when the silence gets too loud? That's when the reality hits them. That's when the panic sets in. And here's the thing, avoidants aren't like anxious people. They don't feel the panic right away. No, they feel relief at first. The breakup gives them space. It gives them the false sense of freedom they've been craving. But what happens when they've had enough space? What happens when they expect you to come knocking and you don't? They don't know how to handle it. Because for the first time, they're the ones feeling abandoned. They're the ones feeling out of control. They are the ones realizing that the very person they pushed away is now completely out of their reach. And that is when they start reaching back. You ever notice how they don't come back when you're still emotional? When you're still begging, still crying, still asking for closure, that's because they already know they have you. They know you're still hooked. But the second you stop, the moment you go silent, the moment you finally move on, that is when they start creeping back in. The random, hey, how have you been? Text, the accidental like on your post, the late night, I was just thinking about you message. It's not love. It's not regret. It's the avoidant panic response. Because suddenly the thing they were so sure of your attachment to them is gone. And nothing terrifies them more than realizing they've lost control over the one person who made them feel safe in their escape. And here's where most people fall for the trap. You start thinking maybe they've changed. Maybe they realize they love me. Maybe this time is different. No, it's not different. This isn't a love story. This is an ego story. This is a person who only values connection when it's slipping through their fingers. And the second they feel like they have you again, the second they see you're still emotionally available, boom, they retreat. They disappear. They go right back to their old patterns because they weren't coming back for you, they were coming back to calm their own and panic. And let me tell you something that will blow your mind. Avoidants don't just come back because they miss you. They come back because they're testing you. They want to see if you're still emotionally invested. They want to see if you're still an option. They want to see if they can still have you without having to fully commit. And the moment they sense that you are still waiting, that you were still hoping, they get their fix and they leave again. And guess what? The cycle starts all over. You have to understand avoidants don't heal through space. They don't process emotions by running. They don't figure things out by disappearing. The only way they ever face their issues is when they are forced to sit in their own discomfort. And the only way that happens, when you stop giving them the safety net of your attachment, when you stop being the emotional crutch they rely on, when you stop giving them the reassurance that no matter how many times they leave, you'll always be there when they return. Because the second they realize that safety is gone, that's when the real panic sets in. And for the first time, they're the ones feeling lost. So now the question is, are you going to keep feeding their illusion of control? Or are you finally going to break free and let them sit in the pain they spent so long running from? You think an avoidant just gets over you. You think they leave and never feel anything. That they're built differently, that they don't suffer, that they just cut you off and move on. Wake UP. That's not reality. That's a story they tell themselves. That's a story they tell you. Avoidants aren't emotionless robots. They feel, they just don't know how to process it. They don't know what to deal with it. So instead of facing their emotions, they bury them. They distract themselves. They convince themselves they never really needed you in the first place. But let me tell you something that will shake you. Avoidants are haunted by the people they run from. You ever notice how they act like the breakup means nothing? How they go silent, disappear, act like you never existed. That's not strength, that's avoidance. That's their entire coping mechanism in action. Because facing the reality of losing someone, processing pain, actually dealing with emotions, that's terrifying to them. They don't know how, they never learned, so they do what they've always done, they shut down, they distance, they detach. But here's the part you don't see. It doesn't last. The distraction, the avoidance, the I don't care attitude, it's all temporary. Because eventually when the distractions run out, when the silence becomes deafening, when they realize you are truly gone, that's when the ghosts start creeping in. That's when the weight of what they lost finally starts hitting them. And that moment comes, it hits hard. But let's be clear, this isn't about love. This isn't about some grand realization that they made a mistake and want to come back to love you properly. No, this is about their own unresolved baggage. Avoidance struggle with connection because it feels like a threat. It feels suffocating. It feels like something they can't control. So what do? They run. They sabotage. They destroy the very thing they want the most. And in the moment, it feels like freedom. It feels like relief. But freedom from what? Relief from what? A person who loved them. A connection they once craved. The second they realize that their freedom just left them empty, that's when the panic sets in. And this is where they start circling back. You ever notice how an avoidant doesn't miss you right after the breakup? How they don't chase you immediately? That's because they don't feel it yet. They don't process loss in real time like you do. An anxious person, they feel everything immediately. They break down, they grieve, they analyze, they try to fix it. But an avoidant, they just put it in a box, shove it in the back of their mind, and tell themselves, I'll deal with it later. And that's exactly why they always come back later. Not because they suddenly love you more, but because their avoidance strategy has an expiration date. The feelings they bury don't disappear, they just get delayed. And when they come back stronger, more confusing, and filled with more regret than they ever thought possible. This is why avoidants don't just move on. They can't. They might jump into another situation. They might distract themselves with work, with friends, with meaningless flings. But true healing, true processing, that doesn't happen for the way it does for others. Because healing requires reflection. Healing requires sitting with pain. And avoidance, they hate that. That's why they push it down. That's why they convince themselves they did the right thing by leaving. But deep down, deep in the silence, when they're finally alone with their thoughts, that is when the truth starts creeping in. And that truth, it's devastating. And here's what you need to hear when they finally realize what they lost, when they finally start missing you, when they finally feel that emptiness creeping in. What do? Do they call you, apologize, say they were wrong, tell you they're ready to love you the way you deserve? No, they don't process emotions like that. Instead, they stalk you from a distance. They watch your social media. They linger in the background. They might throw out a meaningless text. Hey, hope you're doing okay. Not because they're ready to change, but because they want to check if you're still available. They want to see if you're still emotionally attached, if they still have a place in your life. Because the thought of losing control over the situation, that's what truly scares them. And let me tell you something that will shake you to your core. Avoidants don't always come back physically. Sometimes they come back mentally. You think they just forget about you. That they never think about the way you loved them, the way you cared, the way you fought for them. It lingers, it haunts them. But they'll never admit it. They'll never tell you that late at night when there's nobody left to distract them when they're lying in bed scrolling through their phone. Think about you. They wonder where you are. They wonder if you've moved on. They wonder if someone else is getting the love they took for granted. And that's the part that destroys them. But guess what? Their regret doesn't mean they'll change. Their realization doesn't mean they'll suddenly become secure, become loving, become the partner you always needed. Avoidants aren't wired like that. They feel regret, but instead of fixing it, they hide from it. They feel lost, but instead of owning it, they bury it. They might want you back, but instead of fighting for you, they throw out breadcrumbs, hoping you will do the work. And the second they feel like you're still there, still available, still waiting, boom, they retreat. Because their goal was never to truly reconnect. Their goal was to reassure themselves that they still have you, that they still hold some level of control. And this is where most people fall for the trap. Because when an avoidance starts showing up again, liking your posts, sending random texts, appearing in places they know you'll be, it's so easy to think maybe they've changed. Maybe they miss me. Maybe they finally realize they love me. No, they don't miss you. They miss the idea of you. They miss the security you provided. They miss the way you made them feel about themselves. But love, true, healthy, secure love, they still don't know how to give that. Because if they did, they never would have left in the first place. So now the question is, are you going to mistake their regret for love? Are you going to let them back in just so they can run again? Or are you finally going to let them sit in their own regret while you move forward and create the life you actually deserve?